Clarity isn't something you force into existence. It doesn't appear because you think louder, push harder, or run faster inside your own mind. In Buddhism, clarity is what rises when the inner struggle softens, when the mind stops wrestling with itself long enough for truth to quietly surface. And if you've been feeling overwhelmed lately, unable to hear yourself beneath the noise, you're not broken. You're simply exhausted from trying to think your way out of storms that silence could dissolve. Maybe your heart feels heavy. Maybe your thoughts feel tangled, looping the same worries again and again with no exit in sight. Or maybe every decision has begun to feel like a weight instead of a step. When the inner world becomes this loud, confusion isn't a weakness, it's a signal. A sign that your mind is carrying too much, moving too fast, and begging for a softer way of seeing. Not more effort, not more analysis, just space. So if you're listening to this right now, take it as a quiet invitation. A moment to slow down, breathe, and return to the present as gently as you can. Because today, you're not learning how to think harder. You're learning something far more powerful, the Buddhist art of clear seeing. A way of thinking that doesn't come from force, but from calm presence. And in the next few minutes, you may discover that your mind was never the problem. It was simply waiting for you to stop fighting yourself long enough to see what's always been there. Lesson 1. Stillness reveals what effort cannot. We live in a world that has taught us to believe clarity comes from effort, thinking harder, analyzing more, pushing our minds the way we push our bodies when we're in a hurry. But Buddhist wisdom points us towards something far gentler. It teaches that true clarity doesn't bloom under pressure. It appears when the mind becomes quiet enough to notice the truth already inside it. Stillness isn't the absence of thinking. It's the soft inner sunlight that begins to rise when the storm finally stops. Imagine your mind as a lake. When the winds of urgency, fear, and constant problem-solving whip across its surface, the water turns restless and cloudy. No matter how desperately you stare into it, you can't see what lies beneath. But when the wind fades, even for a moment, the ripples soften. The mud settles, and slowly, the water becomes so clear that you can see your own reflection again. That is effortless clarity, not forced, not demanded, revealed. This is why overthinking never helps. When you try to think your way through confusion, you're actually shaking the lake even harder. You're stirring the mud. You're creating noise inside the very space where you need quiet. Stillness, on the other hand, reconnects you to a deeper kind of knowing, the intuition that has been trying to speak beneath the chaos. We forget that the mind has its own form of self-healing. Given stillness, it organizes itself. Given space, it answers questions we've been forcing for too long. So the next time your thoughts feel tangled, don't run toward more information. Don't demand instant answers. Instead, try pausing, just long enough for the wind to soften. Sit with your breath. Let your shoulders drop. Feel the mind settle the way a lake settles at dusk. You don't need to chase clarity. Clarity will rise when you stop chasing everything else. In that soft stillness, your inner truth becomes audible again. And from that truth, the right decisions don't need to be forced. They simply reveal themselves. Lesson 2. Become the witness, not the weather. Most people believe they are their thoughts. They feel a fear and immediately assume, I am afraid. They hear a self-critical voice and think, this must be true. They get caught in anxiety spirals or self-judgment loops and take every passing thought as a reflection of who they are. But in Buddhist wisdom, your thoughts are not your identity. They are simply movements of the mind, weather passing across a vast mountain. And you are the mountain. Storms may come, rain may fall, wind may press against you, but the mountain does not panic. It does not chase every cloud or react to every drop. It remains steady, present, unshaken. The weather passes. The mountain remains. When you begin to see yourself this way, something profound shifts. You stop merging with every emotion, and you start witnessing it with compassion. This is the essence of mindfulness, not blocking thoughts, not fighting them, but watching them with gentle curiosity. When a thought appears, you can simply say, "Ah, a wave of fear is here," or "a judgment has risen," or "this is just an old story returning." The moment you name the thought, you create space. And in that space, the thought loses its power to control you. Think about how often your mind creates unnecessary storms. You make a small mistake, and the mind whispers, "You always mess things up." A friend doesn't text back, and suddenly the mind insists, "They must be upset with you." These are not truths. They are weather, passing, temporary, without substance. And when you learn to step back and observe, instead of stepping into the storm, your inner world becomes calm again. Becoming the quiet observer doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop drowning. You stop reacting to every shift in the sky. You stand grounded, watching the weather move, knowing that no storm lasts forever. When you live as the witness, mental noise begins to fade. Thoughts lose their authority, and clarity, quiet, steady, unwavering, finally has space to arise. Lesson 3. Clarity grows when control softens. One of the quiet truths of Buddhist wisdom is this: the more tightly you try to control life, the more confused you become. Most of us make decisions with our hands clenched, clinging to a specific outcome, terrified of the unknown, desperate for certainty. But attachment doesn't bring clarity, it creates pressure, and pressure clouds the mind. Imagine holding a handful of sand. If you try to grip it tightly, trying to keep every grain safe, what happens? The sand spills through your fingers. But if you hold your hand gently, openly, the sand stays exactly where it belongs. The same is true with your decisions. The tighter you cling to how things must turn out, the more they slip away from you. In Buddhism, this softening is called non-grasping, the art of releasing your chokehold on life so you can finally see clearly again. It's not about giving up. It's about loosening the tension that keeps your mind in knots. When you stop demanding perfection, you make room for alignment, choices that match who you truly are, not who you're afraid of disappointing. So instead of asking, "What is the safest choice?" try asking, "What feels honest?" Instead of asking, "What will make others approve of me?" ask, "What brings peace to my heart?" These questions shift you from fear-based clarity to soul-based clarity. They come from a place where wisdom is natural, not forced. Think of decisions you've struggled with recently. How much of the confusion came from overthinking, and how much came from clinging to a perfect outcome? When you release the need to control every twist and turn, the fog starts to lift. Your mind relaxes, your intuition wakes up. And what once felt complicated becomes surprisingly simple. You don't need to know the entire path. You just need the courage to loosen your grip. When you soften the pressure, life reveals its own direction. And clarity, gentle, steady, grounded, finally has room to rise. Lesson 4. Simplicity cuts through mental fog. There is a quiet truth we rarely hear in today's world. Most confusion doesn't come from a lack of intelligence. It comes from too much noise. When our minds are filled with what-ifs, endless scenarios, other people's opinions, and the pressure to get everything right, even simple decisions begin to feel impossible. Overthinking creates a fog, a kind of mental dimness where everything looks heavier than it really is. But clarity, in its purest form, often arrives through simplicity. Imagine you're standing in a dim room. The lights are off, and everything feels unclear, uncertain, almost suffocating. You squint, trying to see. You strain your eyes. You turn your head in every direction, hoping something makes sense. But no matter how hard you try, the room stays dark. Then, someone walks over and opens a window. Not a door, not all the lights, just a window. And suddenly, a single stream of natural light fills the room. The shapes become visible. The space feels breathable. You can finally see what was already there. That window is simplicity. When you simplify your thoughts, you're not avoiding responsibility. You're giving your mind space to breathe. The problem is not that your life is too complicated. The problem is that your perspective has become too narrow, too cluttered, too tightly wound. And when the mind becomes tight, everything feels heavier than it actually is. This is why Buddhist thought encourages minimalist decision-making. Before you let your mind run wild with possibilities, ask yourself 3 grounding questions. 1. What's real right now? Not the stories your mind is spinning. Not the fears your imagination is exaggerating. What is actually happening in this moment? The present is always simpler than the mind's predictions. 2. What truly matters? Most of the things we stress about don't matter a week later, sometimes not even a day later. Strip away the noise, and you'll find the heart of the matter hiding underneath. 3. What brings lightness, not heaviness? Your body knows what your mind complicates. When a choice feels tight, frantic, pressured, pause. When a choice feels open, honest, and gentle, listen. Another powerful way to regain clarity is to zoom out. When you're pressed against a problem, it fills your entire vision. It looks enormous, urgent, life-changing. But if you step back, metaphorically or literally, everything shifts. Problems that felt massive begin to shrink. Options you couldn't see suddenly appear. The mind relaxes, and clarity enters through the space that opens. Think of how many decisions you've spiraled over simply because you refused to zoom out. You stayed in the dim room, staring into the darkness, hoping the answer would magically appear. But answers rarely appear in darkness. They appear when you open the window, when you allow simplicity to illuminate what fear has complicated. So the next time your mind feels tangled, don't think harder. Open the window. Ask the simple questions. Zoom out. Give your thoughts space to breathe. Because clarity doesn't come from piling more into your mind. It comes from clearing enough space for your inner wisdom to be heard. Lesson 5. Clear space, clear mind. We often assume that confusion comes from not knowing enough, not planning enough, or not thinking enough. But in Buddhist wisdom, mental fog rarely comes from a lack of information. It comes from having too much, too many old emotions, too many unhealed memories, too many opinions, too many digital voices, too many expectations pressing against the mind. Clarity doesn't rise when you add more into your life. It rises when you begin gently clearing what no longer belongs. Your mind is like a lantern. Whether the flame inside burns brightly or softly, the light exists. But if the glass around that flame is dusty, covered in old fears, resentments, guilt, comparison, noise, then even the strongest flame cannot shine through clearly. The problem is not the fire in you. The problem is the dust you've been carrying for years. Every unresolved emotion leaves residue, a grudge that sits unspoken, a regret from years ago, a disappointment you never processed, a mistake you still punish yourself for. All of these cling to the inner glass of your lantern, and without realizing it, they shape how you see the world. A small inconvenience feels like a crisis. A simple decision feels heavy. A conversation feels threatening. Emotional dust distorts perception, making everything look harder than it actually is. This is why internal clearing is a powerful form of clarity. When you loosen the emotional knots inside, your thoughts stop twisting around them. Start with releasing grudges, not because the other person deserves forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. Carrying resentment is like dragging a heavy bag into every decision you make. When you let go, even a little, your heart feels lighter, and your mind follows. You don't have to forgive completely, and certainly not instantly. Just loosen your grip. Let one piece of resentment fall away. The relief will surprise you. Next, consider the digital noise that fills your mind every day. The constant scrolling, the endless notifications, the opinions, the drama, the pressure to keep up. It all leaves dust on the lantern. Set boundaries with your digital world. Unfollow accounts that shrink your confidence. Reduce the time you spend consuming content that leaves you anxious or confused. Create moments of digital silence where your inner voice can breathe again. Even 10 minutes of quiet can begin to cleanse the mind. One of the most important but overlooked practices is gentle self-forgiveness. Many people can forgive others, but they cannot forgive themselves. They hold on to mistakes like anchor weights, dragging them into every new moment. But clarity cannot emerge in a mind that is still punishing itself for the past. You don't clean a lantern by smashing it for being dirty. You clean it by treating it with care. Speak to yourself with the same softness you would offer to a friend who is hurting. Tell yourself, I am learning, I am healing, I am allowed to begin again. Self-forgiveness isn't a reward, it's a requirement for inner light. Just as you might tidy your room to feel fresh and organized, you can also tidy your inner world. Release a lingering resentment. Step back from digital noise. Offer yourself the gentleness you've been withholding. Slowly, the dust begins to clear. And as the glass clears, your inner flame, your wisdom, your intuition, your truth begins to shine through again. Clarity doesn't come from forcing the mind to be perfect. It comes from clearing the space around your inner light so it can finally be seen. And once that light shines, decisions feel lighter, life feels softer, and you feel renewed from the inside out. Lesson 6. Let the question breathe. In our world today, speed is celebrated. Fast decisions, fast answers, fast solutions. We have been trained to believe that if we do not know something immediately, something must be wrong with us, that intelligence is measured by quickness, not depth. But Buddhist wisdom teaches the opposite. It reminds us that some truths cannot be forced, some answers cannot be rushed, and some clarity cannot be summoned on command. Because the most important truths in our lives do not arrive like lightning. They bloom slowly, like morning light spreading across the sky. Think about the last time you felt pressured to decide something quickly. Maybe you felt unsure, but you convinced yourself you needed to know right now. And in that urgency, you reached for the first answer that quieted your discomfort, not the one that honored your truth. This is how most people live, not choosing from wisdom, but from impatience. Not because they don't know the right path, but because they never gave themselves enough space for the right path to reveal itself. Some questions need time, not because the answer is far away, but because you are still arriving. Imagine planting a seed and digging it up every hour to see if it's growing. You would never do that. You know it needs soil, darkness, moisture, and time. You know that growth is quiet, unseen, and slow. Yet we treat our questions with none of this patience. We demand clarity from a heart that hasn't finished feeling, from a mind that hasn't finished processing, from a soul that hasn't finished becoming. But the deeper question isn't, what should I do? It is often, what am I truly longing for? What am I afraid to lose? What truth am I avoiding? What pain am I trying to outrun? When you sit with these deeper questions, something powerful happens. The frantic energy begins to soften. The noise inside your mind becomes gentler. And the answer that once felt distant begins to rise, not because you chased it, but because you finally became quite enough to receive it. Some truths bloom slowly, like morning light, soft at first, almost unnoticed, then gradually illuminating everything. You don't see the sunrise by demanding it. You witness it by waiting with openness. In the same way, clarity often comes not when you force your mind to choose, but when you allow your inner world to settle into honesty. Patience with uncertainty is one of the hardest spiritual practices. The mind hates not knowing. It tries to fill the silence with noise, the gap with fear, the waiting with imagined scenarios. But uncertainty is not your enemy. It is the space where wisdom takes shape. It is the fertile ground where inner clarity grows roots. When a difficult question enters your life, whether about love, career, identity, or purpose, don't jump to kill the discomfort. Let yourself feel it. Let yourself breathe with it. Let yourself sit in the space where nothing is decided yet. This space is sacred. It is where your deeper self begins to speak. One way to practice this is to ask yourself, what is the question beneath the question? If you are asking, should I leave this relationship? Maybe the real question is, do I feel valued? If you are asking, should I quit my job? Maybe the deeper question is, what part of me feels unfulfilled? If you are asking, what is my purpose? The true question might be, what part of my life feels disconnected from my heart? When you sit gently with the deeper question, the surface level confusion begins to dissolve. Another practice is to feel the question in your body, not just think it in your mind. Notice how your chest tightens with certain thoughts. Notice how your breath becomes shallow when fear tries to answer for you. And notice how your body relaxes when something feels true, even if it's uncertain. The body knows before the mind does. It senses alignment before logic can explain it. Letting the question breathe is a form of trust. Trust that you do not need to force clarity. Trust that your inner knowing is intact, even if it's quiet right now. Trust that you are capable of living with a little uncertainty while your wisdom ripens. When the right answer is ready, it won't arrive with panic or pressure. It will feel like a soft yes rising from within, a quiet settling, a gentle recognition. That is the moment when the answer finds you, not because you chased it, but because you waited with grace. So, let your questions breathe. Let them rest inside you the way seeds rest in soil, unseen, but full of potential. Allow the morning light of clarity to arrive in its own time. Because wisdom that grows slowly becomes the kind of wisdom you can trust. And the answers that come from patience are the answers that transform your life. Lesson 7. A clear mind begins with an honest heart. Clarity is not only a mental practice, it is also an emotional one. You can read all the books, meditate every morning, analyze every decision. But if your heart is carrying unspoken pain, unhealed wounds, hidden fears, or old grudges, your mind will struggle to see clearly. Because the mind does not think independently of the heart. It interprets life through the emotions you carry. And if those emotions are heavy, everything will feel heavy. Think of a compass. Its job is simple, to point north, but place just a few small magnets around it, and the needle begins to wobble. It points in the wrong direction, not because the compass is broken, but because something unseen is distorting it. Your mind is that compass. And the magnets, the things pulling you off course, are the emotions you haven't fully faced. You may try to think clearly, make wise decisions, or find purpose, but if anger sits quietly in your chest, if guilt lies buried under your ribs, if bitterness or jealousy lingers in the corners of your heart, they will pull your thoughts away from truth. They will distort your clarity without you even realizing it. This is why Buddhism emphasizes right intention, not just right thought. Clear thinking requires emotional honesty. You cannot see the path clearly if you are secretly hoping for the wrong things, running from your own feelings, or pretending everything is fine when it isn't. Honesty with yourself is the first cleansing of the heart. Ask yourself gently, what emotion is shaping my decisions right now? Is this desire coming from fear or from truth? What outcome am I clinging to because I'm afraid of the alternative? What am I refusing to feel? Most people avoid these questions because they fear the answers. But avoidance doesn't protect you. It only strengthens the magnets. Unfelt emotions do not disappear. They leak into your thoughts. They disguise themselves as logic, certainty, and reasoning. Suddenly, what seems like a rational decision is actually a reaction to an old wound you never healed. This is why self-honesty is a spiritual practice. When you acknowledge what's really happening inside you, the inner distortion begins to soften. Your compass begins to steady. Another powerful part of emotional clarity is compassion toward yourself. Many people believe they are being honest when they criticize themselves. But harshness isn't honesty, it's punishment. And punishment creates confusion. A mind that feels attacked retreats into defensiveness, avoidance, and fear. But a mind that feels safe can tell the truth. Speak to yourself gently. Say, I'm trying, even when you feel lost. Say, I didn't know better back then, even when you regret the past. Say, I deserve another chance, even when part of you whispers that you don't. Self-compassion cleans the inner space where clarity lives. And then there is forgiveness, the quiet cleansing most people resist. We often hold on to resentment believing it protects us. But resentment is not a shield. It is a weight. It doesn't keep danger away. It keeps peace away. It doesn't make you stronger. It makes your heart tense, guarded, and tired. And a tired heart cannot guide a clear mind. Forgiveness does not mean excusing what happened. It means no longer allowing it to control your clarity. It means putting down emotional burdens you were never meant to carry forever. When you forgive, even slightly, the magnets lose power. The needle of your inner compass settles. Kindness is another form of clarity. When your choices come from kindness, toward yourself, toward others, toward the world around you, something remarkable happens. Decisions that once felt complicated become simple. The mind is no longer wrestling with hidden motives or unspoken fears. It is aligned with the heart. And when your heart and mind are in harmony, clarity becomes effortless. So many people try to think clearly while carrying a storm inside. They meditate for clarity, journal for clarity, consume content for clarity, without realizing the real block is emotional tension. But when you release what your heart is holding, the guilt, the disappointment, the jealousy, the fear, the need to be right, the need to be perfect, your mind begins to shine with ease, not because you forced it, but because you removed what was clouding it. A clear mind is not a mind free of thoughts. It is a mind guided by a heart that is at peace. So take a breath and look inward. Let yourself feel what you've been avoiding. Loosen the grip of old emotional habits. Forgive where it hurts. Speak gently to the parts of you still healing. Treat yourself with the compassion you've been denying, because clarity does not just come from thinking better, it comes from loving better. And when your heart becomes light, open, and honest, your mind becomes the clearest guide you have. Clarity doesn't arrive with noise. It doesn't appear when the mind is tense, busy, or pushing for answers. It arrives in the same way dawn arrives, quietly, gently, in its own time. It comes when you stop gripping your mind like a fist, when you stop wrestling with thoughts that were never meant to be solved in one night, When you finally allow yourself to breathe instead of battle. When you soften, even a little, something inside you opens. And in that opening, the next step begins to shine on its own. Not forced, not chased, simply revealed. Tonight, loosen your thoughts. Let them unfurl the way petals unfurl at first light. Rest your heart. It has carried enough. Let the tension melt. Let the questions breathe. Let yourself exist without needing to perform or decide. Because beneath everything your mind has been trying to figure out, there is a quiet wisdom that has been waiting to be heard. A calm knowing, a steady truth, a gentle direction rising from within you, like dawn, over a still horizon. Trust that inner light. Let it guide you softly. Let it show you that clarity isn't something you chase. It's something you remember, something that awakens when you become quiet enough to feel your own soul again.